Nexus PMG welcomes you to the Bigger Than Us podcast, which we as energy geeks lovingly refer to as the BTU. Bigger Than Us is a podcast that focuses on ideas that will shape the future of our planet and ultimately our existence. We will occasionally lean into energy topics because, after all, it's the key to our collective survival. But we'll also explore other ideas and topics that we believe will have an impact that is bigger than us. And now, on to today's show. Hello, and welcome to the Bigger Than Us podcast. I'm your host, Raj Daniels, and today I'd like to welcome Mike Kaplan to the show. Mike Kaplan currently leads Engie's Insights marketing organization, responsible for adoption and awareness of the company's leading sustainable resource management to multi-site business customers. In addition to nearly 20 years of business-to-business marketing and strategy experience, Mike has extensive knowledge of the intersection of data analytics and commercial energy efficiency. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Raj. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on with you and your listeners.
Mike, I'm excited to have you on the show too. Where in the world are you?
I am in Needham, Massachusetts, in my home, of course, like many other people, right outside of Boston.
And how's the weather up there?
It is pretty mild. So we've had some warm spells, had some cooler spells, but I think summer is coming soon. So excited about that.
I'm a little envious. I think here today in Dallas it's going to be 95 degrees, so I think we're rushing into summer.
We are not quite there yet, probably a few weeks behind you.
Well, Mike, I like to start my show by asking my guests the following question. If you were asked to share something interesting about yourself, what would it be?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, I think in the context of professionally speaking, I got into the energy and sustainability world. I don't want to say by accident, but I was first part of my career was really focused on the technology space, and I joined a startup that was focused on energy data analytics. And so I was very interested in disruptive technologies, but then started learning about the energy and sustainability space and grew a passion for it in that way. So I'm always interested to hear about different people and how they came into the sector because I think it helps inform our opinions and new ways of thinking about this massive problem.
So it sounds like it was serendipity, which is one of my favorite words.
I guess so, yes.
So, you mentioned data and analytics. Can you share a little bit about your current organization?
Sure. So I am the Chief Marketing Officer of Engie Impact. So Engie Impact is the sustainability consulting and services arm of Engie, which is actually the largest company in the world focused on the low carbon energy transition and related services. And so Engie Impact on its own has about 2,000 people across 20 offices around the world. And we work with corporations, cities, public sector, and clients managing around 1 million sites in terms of their energy, water, waste. So anything that has to do with accelerating sustainability transformation at speed and scale with very large corporations, dispersed corporations on complex problems is really kind of our sweet spot.
That's fascinating. Can you share some of the projects that you're working on?
Sure. So, we work, for example, with clients like FedEx, Whole Foods, Hyatt Hotels, anybody with large distributed portfolios, which, whether you're just in the US alone, all the different regulations, state by state to around the world, and the complexities of managing your energy, water, waste, carbon goals. So typical types of engagements are one, starting from a strategic standpoint. We really are increasingly working at the highest levels of these organizations to think about what should your sustainability roadmap be, and how do you make that very bankable, as we'd call it. So, really have that level of detail to make sure that it's investable. And a lot of that starts with the data, right? So taking in all of the current performance data and analyzing that data across all those resources, and that's what generates, your recommendations. And then how do you execute? So one, implement those projects, and sometimes we will work with, when it makes sense, our sister organizations across Engie and that global reach, but then also supporting them in terms of understanding their energy supply, are from the starting point of are they on the right rates and contracts based on their energy usage, to increasingly helping them procure green power. And then finally, how do you track and report on all of that? So our clients are increasingly looking to report for their stakeholders to things like CDP, and so we will assist them in that process as well.
So it sounds like you have access to a lot of data. What are some of the trends you're seeing in the data?
Well, right now, I mean, the biggest thing that we are trying to understand for a lot of our clients is the impact of COVID. There's a really interesting just debate that I think the industry needs to understand around. We are shifting and potentially permanently shifting for some companies to more remote work models. And so what does that mean for our footprint? Obviously, we are reducing, not using very much energy in our offices and other our retail stores right now. But what does that mean in terms of that energy and carbon footprint being displaced elsewhere? Those are some of the questions that we're trying to understand, I think, in real time for a lot of our clients. More broadly, there's even ahead of this, there's clients that run the spectrum of their energy and sustainability management journey. So from the very tactical clients who are just starting, most companies have been doing project for years, but some of the earlier stage in terms of their journey are just picking off kind of the low hanging fruit of energy efficiency, and then moving towards that spectrum to more active management of their energy, moving and thinking beyond factors just such as cost to that carbon footprint in a more sophisticated.
And what are some of the challenges you're seeing around this transition, from a company that perhaps had, let's say, a few hundred, if not a few thousand employees at their locations, and now they're working from home?
One, tracking and understanding how that is, how that footprint has changed, and then I think different sites have different ways across a portfolio that they can or can't respond. What I mean by that is some sites have well deeper solutions around controls and whatnot, so they can very flexibly manage that load, but other sites don't. And so, when companies, for starters, don't necessarily even know which sites have those controls versus not, that can make things challenging. And then as we start to think about moving back to work, a lot of our clients are asking, well, I'm going to need to put in health and safety measures. And so that could have impacts on things like, the amount of airflow that a building needs. And so what is the impact therefore on energy? So a lot of complexity in those systems, and needing to balance health, safety, first and foremost, but then how do you optimize to get minimize the environmental impact in the long term?
That really is an interesting thought as you try to unwind this, ball of wool, if you will, how workspaces will have to change, and what's the new accounting for the energy, and also how do you account for the energy that your employees are now using at home and not traveling. It sounds very, very complicated. How do you even begin to parse some of this data?
Well, I think first and foremost, just understanding with our clients what they are trying uh, to accomplish, what problem are they looking to solve, and the challenge in our industry, like many industries, is that the data is all over the place. I think we are fortunate in that we have a very large one part of our business where we are taking in that data from, for example, utility bills every month, and helping with the expense and the accuracy of that data. So having that very solid foundation of accurate data um, is important. So that's one fortunate thing in terms of the historical services we've provided for our clients, that we're in a good position to have that good starting point. And then, you start to look at things like, what other types of data do you need to collect, be it directly about that usage and how granularly. So things like IoT and sensor data, if you need for more granular applications, and then bringing in the uh, other operational asset data that you might need to normalize against to really understand how one site is truly performing against another.
So, Mike, I appreciate you sharing that. The crux of our conversation is the why behind what you do. So, you mentioned being with a startup and then transitioning into this energy impact space, sustainability. What drives you? What keeps you coming back every single day?
As I mentioned at the top, I was attracted to the startup that I joined around energy data analytics, because it was very disruptive. It was a better way of doing things, and as my passion for sustainability has grown over the years, one of the, if not the number one challenge we face as a society, it's really the importance of that, and then the complexity of trying to solve that through better means. And so, for me, and part of my role is to help try to clearly articulate that to our clients, and show them, help our teams, work with our teams to show that client value, and show them that there is a better way, by a whole set of different solutions, be it, we talked about the data, so that sort of digital aspect, to the strategy, to the actual process of how do you implement this at scale. So I think for me, what gets me up every day is the problem we are trying to solve, and then the complexity of that problem, which at times can feel daunting for everyone, but also when you actually have those successes, it's a big time reward and extremely fulfilling. So it's hard for me to envision, when I think about the first part of my career, you know, the moving away from something that is not as purpose driven as what I'm able to do every day.
So, you mentioned clients and successes. Obviously, without mentioning any client names, could you give us a story regarding a client that you'd helped recently?
One client that we're working with that I'm really excited about, that I think speaks to fundamentally what we are trying to do, is GE Renewable Energy. So we started working with them last year, when they announced a goal to become carbon neutral by the end of this year. And they have 300 sites all around the world. So think about the factories that actually make things like wind turbines, to offices, to warehouses. And we are helping them by looking at all of those sites and understanding where are those energy efficiency opportunities, where are those renewable opportunities. And so, um, we're progressing with them on this journey and learning a lot. And so that's one that I'm excited about.
That's interesting. So, you mentioned carbon neutral by the end of this year. And just to clarify, what exactly does carbon neutral mean?
That is a great question that a lot of the sustainability experts within my company have a lot of discussion around. But essentially, it is in some form or fashion balancing the emissions that you put out into the atmosphere, and those that you reduce. And there's a whole variety of ways to do that: carbon credits, energy efficiency, and things of that. And then obviously renewables as a way to reduce your carbon footprint and get to a neutral standpoint. Interestingly, what we've seen recently from some of the most leading edge companies, corporations like Microsoft and IKEA, is at the term carbon negative or carbon positive, and fundamentally they mean the same thing. It's just a different spin on the same term, and that is actually taking out of the atmosphere more than you were putting into it. So that's an interesting new trend on targets.
And I asked for that very reason because I know there's a almost like a fuzzy gray area where there's a lot of debate right now what carbon neutral means. So I really appreciate you trying to clarify that. So, any particular favorite projects that Engie works on that you really like?
So another one, more broadly speaking, beyond just Engie Impact, is work that Engie North America is doing in North America with universities like Ohio State and Iowa, University of Iowa. And think of those campuses; they are like small cities. So Ohio State, hundreds of, I believe, something like 400,000 people, if I'm not mistaken. Essentially what Engie is doing is they have taken over all of the operations around their energy plants and sustainability goals over a 50-year time horizon. And so this is an extremely long-term engagement and relationship with Ohio State to drive towards their energy and carbon reduction goals. And really embedding all of the expertise that Engie can bring to bear over the course of those 50 years. So it's a pretty innovative approach whereby Engie essentially takes ownership uh, of those assets and is responsible for their performance and a very shared alignment in terms of trying to reduce the cost, the usage, and of course that footprint.
That is really interesting. So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying the deal includes Engie taking over the assets and then essentially helping Ohio State meet their carbon goals. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and as well as other sustainability goals.
That is really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So, being a CMO, what's a day in the life look like for a CMO at Engie Impact?
Well, we're trying to accomplish a number of things. We're, as I said, a global organization, so we're thinking about how do we support our clients on a global basis, as well as what do clients in different regions need. How do the value propositions uh, differ? So that's a big thing that I'm thinking about, as well as the link. I spoke about that connection between our services, and so making sure that we're articulating that. And then a big part of my job is also um, working with my team on things like our employee engagement, which is very critical right now for lots of companies, thinking about that aspect of ensuring our people are still engaged so they can do the very important work that they need to do every day.
So, how big is your team right now?
We have a marketing organization of just under 30 people.
And during this pandemic, I'm assuming everyone's distributed. How's that working for you?
We've had to quickly innovate. I'm fortunate that I have a highly motivated, energetic team that is constantly bringing great ideas. So we had to quickly pivot in terms of thinking about making sure we're doing virtual meetings. Some of that is work related, and some of that is just plain fun, because I think that's important, especially in this environment. And then keeping it interesting, right? So we try to vary those activities up, because I think everybody's feeling the sense of moving into the days can start to bleed together. I guess I'll say it that way. And so making sure we try to have those moments where we can inject something new, exciting, different. And then just making sure we're doing as much as we can to separate work from home, and that's incredibly challenging.
You're so right. I've heard it said a few times now that people feel like they're inefficient employees and inefficient parents and spouses because everything's kind of blurring together. There are no lines. So applause to you for trying to inject fun into it. If you were to, share some advice regarding fun, how can one inject fun into some of these meetings or events?
That's a great question. There's been a bunch of things. As I said, we tried to vary it. On our last call, we shared our baby pictures, which was a lot of fun, and people were quite accurate with who they guessing the correct person. We've tried to step out of our normal professional attire, wear different gear, be it athletic gear or vacation type gear, showing different souvenirs. So it's from trips and things, and so we've definitely brought that personal aspect into it, and I think people have really enjoyed that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I think one of the things I heard recently is that this time has allowed a lot of us to humanize each other. And what I mean by that is that we're getting to look inside, our coworkers' homes, see family, see pets, see pictures, books, etc. And so a lot of times when an employee shows up to an office, you only get one dimension of that employee. But being on these calls has definitely opened up people's eyes to who they're working with. So I think a lot of what you just mentioned, plays directly into that.
Absolutely.
So, Mike, on this journey of yours, with Engie, what are some of the things you'd say you've learned or aha surprise moments?
It really for me, I think goes back to where I came into the industry. It was very much from a technology orientation and how can technology help us do things more efficiently, better. But what I learned over time, especially in the energy and sustainability space, is technology is only one piece of the puzzle, and very often it's about people making things happen, contextualizing that information that they're seeing in the right way for a situation, and then actually being the ones to do and make the change, drive the results. So technology is never going to be a silver bullet. It's an important enabler. Um, I remember we did a couple of years ago, we called it a coast to coast sustainability tour where we went around the US a couple of summers ago, did a 10-day, 10 city, 9,000-mile tour to see what was happening in terms of um, what different companies were doing from a sustainability perspective. And we spoke with, I think, close to about 100 companies and partners over those 2 weeks. And I was really struck over that period when, we really asked people, what are the keys to your success? Overwhelming majority responded talking about their employees, talking about people. That was the first thing that came to mind. So it wasn't like, oh, about necessarily the cost of solar dropping or energy efficiency adoption and things of that nature, which of course they did talk about. But overwhelmingly, the thing that we heard was it was really about people driving the success. And then in some cases where, you know, companies are facing challenges, the question they were asking is how do we help transform our people to think more sustainably in the everyday uh, work and personal lives.
To me, that sounds really beautiful. I think all too often, perhaps to your point, we look at technology, as you mentioned, as a silver bullet or data. But I think those leaders that can really understand that ultimately it's the people, I think those are the ones that are going to have the sustainable corporations and sustainable organizations, if you will, going forward. So that really resonates strongly, and I appreciate you sharing that. So, Mike, last question for you is that if you could share some advice or words of wisdom with the audience, what would it be?
I think that it's really just about the fact that change is possible. So if you can envision a new and better future, you can make it happen. But there is never one silver bullet, and think often disruptive change occurs when a number of different factors and actors come together at the right time and the right place. But when they do, change can happen at a much more accelerated pace than we even predicted. So I just encourage any of your listeners to keep that in mind, understand what it takes to make change, but know that it is possible, and we certainly need change agents in this world to solve some of our biggest challenges.
Thank you so much for that, Mike, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Is there anything that we have not explored that you'd like to talk about before we go?
No, I really appreciate the time, and it was great speaking with you as well.
Thank you for your time today, Mike. Thank you for listening. And if you like our show, please give us a rating and review on iTunes. And if you want to show your support, please share our show with a friend or reach out to us on social media where you'll find us under our Nexus PMG handle. Bigger Than Us is a Nexus PMG production.